Richard. As if by magic. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Harry Sherrard, and on behalf of the Brooklands Talks team, a very warm welcome to Brooklands. And without any further ado from me, please give a very warm welcome to Derek Warwick and Simon Taylor.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Harry. Good evening. Derek is wearing a sort of pom-pom, which I think must be something to do with your microphone. It's not your normal garb. It's very good news that at last we have an autobiography of Derek Warwick, because Derek is one of Britain's greatest racing drivers with 146 Grand Prix under his belt. He won 2 World Championship titles in different disciplines, and he won them 20 years apart. He won the Le Mans 24 Hours, and he ran his own British touring car team. But more than that, Derek has never been your typical Formula One driver. He was always very fast and very brave, as you saw in that clip there. But also, he has always been unfailingly honest, good-humoured, and open-hearted, and eternally positive and forward-looking, even though his career has not always dealt him a fair hand. And that's really why his autobiography is called Never Look Back. Well, we're going to hear all about the stuff that's in the autobiography. You will, if you haven't already, be able to buy it and probably get Derek to sign it for an amazing discount. So the publisher, Eric Verdon, tells me you can get it for 50 quid, and it would cost you a lot more if you bought it at a shop or on Amazon. And just a word about the book, because I've read more drivers' autobiographies than I can count. But I have to say this book is different, because it doesn't just tell you about the racing driver and his races. It tells you about the man as a human being, everything that Derek has done, his own philosophy, and how he has liked to live a good and fair life. We can't go through it blow by blow because the book does that for you. But Derek, let's start with, if I can press the right button.
But you saw that accident where I went upside down at Hockenheim. I'm still taking bits of gravel out my ear now. It's so compressed me in the car, and every time I see it, I just think it's amazing that I got out and everything was working fine. So I was lucky enough we had a spare car in them days, so I just jumped in the spare car and raced again.
Well, actually, before we get to this wonderful picture there, which shows you a very early shot of Derek Warwick, maybe this is a moment that we can talk. Although we can come to it chronologically, but of course there was another extraordinary accident that you had, which was in a race, and the car was destroyed, and you were very nearly destroyed, and yet because they stopped the race, and it was only at the end of lap 1, you were able to get in the spare car and start that race as it was started again. Tell us a bit about that.
90 with Lotus. It was the first lap. I tell a lot of people that the car broke because it was an easier excuse than what actually happened.
Which was?
I got too close to the car in front and understeered off. What can I say? What can I say? But, you know, people talk about their life flashes before you when you have something near to death. And I think that day I thought exactly that, because I thought something serious was going to happen. And there's lots of milliseconds, little pictures of my wife, my children, my friends, my family, all before it hit the barrier. And then, obviously, the car went upside down. And then, as I'm going upside down at probably 140, 150 mile an hour, I'm thinking, right, this hurts, because my head was bouncing off the tarmac. I thought, this hurts. So I picked my head up. I thought, right, now, okay, this thing's going to catch fire. So I turned the engine off. This is how much time you've got in 7 seconds, I think it was. In 7 seconds, I had the ability to turn the car off, take the steering wheel off, put it in my lap, so that I knew that when this thing stopped, I could hit the belt and jump out. And as I'm jumping out, I'm thinking, lap 1, lap one. If I can get into the pits, into the spare car, within 15 minutes, I can rejoin the race. So that's when I ran down the pits and jumped into the spare car. And from that day on, my mother never spoke to me.
Wonderful.
She uttered words something like, "You're stupid, mad," or something. I can't.
And actually, the quality of the pictures aren't quite good enough for us to put them on the screen. But there are 3 shots in this wonderful book of Derek having that accident. And
Simon, I thought we weren't going to talk about accidents all the time, because I seem to have a lot of accidents, spectacular accidents.
We've dealt with the 2 big ones.
Okay.
We're all right now. We're all right now. Well, in fact, let's go back to this, because your family ran a company, Warwick Trailers, in the little Wiltshire town of Alresford, and you learned the meaning of hard work in the trailer factory while you were still in primary school. I think then you hadn't even yet gone to school. And
to be honest, I was always chubby. You can see that there, can't you? So that's why me, Mansell and Berger always vied for the heaviest Grand Prix drivers, because there it started.
Now, the next slide, this shows you at work. And I think this gentleman here on the right, is that Derry or is that Uncle Stan?
No, that's Uncle Stan.
That's Uncle Stan. So there you are in this little Wiltshire village, growing up in this very... Hampshire, forgive me.
Hampshire.
Yeah, bad mistake. All right, little Hampshire village. And you're working in the little family business. Uncle Stan is working alongside you. He was kind of an unusual character, wasn't he? Tell us a bit about Uncle Stan.
Uncle Stan was special. Without him, I wouldn't have been in motor racing. I wouldn't have been sat here talking to you lovely people. And by the way, thank you for coming. This is amazing. I wasn't expecting this. So I don't know what you were expecting, but anyway, it's... but he was amazing. He was... I always use the word naughty, because he was a really, really naughty person. And a lot of that comes out in the book. Not all the juicy stuff, but he was naughty. He did everything wrong. He flew aerobatic airplanes. He flew helicopters. He wrote off 8 brand new Jaguars. He was just an unbelievable character. But without that kind of character, he was the one that was always pushing me forward. My father was always an amazing man, but he always was the person looking after the purse strings, if you like. But Stan was amazing. He got me into Formula Ford. He pushed me to Formula 3. He helped me with Formula 2, and then he just followed me everywhere in Formula 1. So, yeah, he was a really naughty man, and but a character. One of those guys that was around today, he'd have been locked up instantly. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I owe a lot to him, and my father, of course. But Uncle Stan was... We used to... When we went from Superstocks to Formula Ford, we couldn't get Dad interested. So we put this budget together on a fag paper, basically, but lied all the way through, driven by Uncle Stan, to make Dad say that he could afford it. We did the same in Formula 3, and even when we went the first year of Formula 2, there was that same fag packet that Stan used to come up and present to his brother. So, yeah, he was really special in my life.
And what we've got to do is go straight from here and the rough work going on in the Hampshire factory to stock cars.
Well, excuse me, but this drop was important because it actually carved a little circuit out in a 3-acre field we had beside the circuit, beside the Warwick trailers, that I could just drive these bangers round and round and round and round. Yeah. So that's where he's getting it going, so I can start driving again.
Well, if I can work the machine right. Now, this is Formula 2 stock cars?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Superstocks.
Okay. And I think you told the little porky pie to be able to start racing. You told a little lie about your age.
Well, I still got the birth certificate. It was I rubbed it out, just literally rubbed it out, and put a year earlier so I could start at 16, and I was actually only 15. So actually we've got Mark Eaton here who owns Speedworth, so I kidded them, so I was a year older than what I was. So I'm taking that off now, by the way. I'm not that year older anymore.
Now, a little word about the technique of racing a stock car. It's on a quarter-mile oval, always turning left. The surface is shale.
Shale, tarmac, concrete, lots of different surfaces. So you had to get used to a lot of different surfaces. And although there was effectively only 2 corners, getting the most out of 2 corners is in some ways harder than getting them out of 15. So it taught you mechanical knowledge. We built our own stock car, our own chassis. Stan and I built engines. And my brother-in-law over there, Chris, used to paint the car. So it was a bit of a family effort. I've got my 3 mechanics here, and I like to call them out, Bob, Baz and Alf. They were with me from the stock car days all the way through Formula Ford and all the way through Formula 3. So we were still racing Formula Ford and Formula 3 with the 4 of us, and we weren't allowed to work on the car during the day because I had to work at Warwick Trailers. We all came back after supper at 6 o'clock, and we worked to 10, 11, 12 o'clock, whatever was needed, to get the cars ready for the next race. But of course, with Superstocks, we would race maybe 3-4 times a week. And these guys gave up their spare time always to be with me to make sure I was there and prepared. But yeah, we were a good little crew. We really would. They were useless mechanics, but they were good backups. No, we really cut our cloth there, and we saved as much money as we could in order to compete. And when you think about it, we were competing in Formula 3 with Nelson Piquet, Chico Serra, De Cesres, some great drivers, and we were beating them. So not bad for a little team in Hampshire.
Hampshire. I don't know where I got Wiltshire from. So, with some persuasion and help from Uncle Stan, you did make the big move into Formula Ford. And there you are leading. You'd be able to identify who those guys are. Formula Ford then, not quite sure how it compares today, but Formula Ford was incredibly competitive. Everybody had effectively the same engine, the same tyres, chassis were all fairly similar. So that must have been a pretty tough nursery, but the lessons you learned in stock car racing, were you able to take them into Formula Ford? And
also you've got to remember, with a Superstock, you only ran 1 gear. And you used to bungee the gear shifting in place because you used to jump out of gear. So you just bunged it. And all of a sudden, I've got another pedal to play with. And we've got a Hewlett gearbox, independent suspension. And it was just a massive jump for us. And I remember in this car at Silverstone, we were really struggling on the straight. So Uncle Stan, the engine guru, he got the distributor, loosened the bolt, and just gave a little tap. He said, that'll be fine. I advanced it a little bit. But of course, he retarded it, and I couldn't even get out of 4th gear. So another lesson learned. But what this shot shows, actually, is a great shot because there's about 15 cars in front of me. Because that was a shit car, to be honest. It was a Hawk DL12, and we never really got going until halfway through this year. Me and the boys went and got a Hawk DL15, and that was a proper car. It was nice.
But somehow you managed to scrape together the funds to move up that crucial step up the ladder. In 1977, you went into Formula 3, and there you are. I guess that's Cadwell Park, isn't it?
It is, over the hump, yeah.
Going over that hump.
Well, see, we couldn't go Formula 3. That was just a big step. Even Stan said, look, we can't do this. And we had a great salesman called Pete Rawlings who was trying to sell trailers, but we were very busy during mid-70s, and we couldn't take any more orders. But he got an inquiry from Saudi Arabia for 6 Bell trailers. I don't know, we'll say they cost us £500 to build. And we said, look, Pete, we just can't do another order. We just can't do any more. He said, well, I've got to go back and tell them something. And we said, well, I didn't. Dad and Stan said, I'll tell them £4,000 each. He said, but that's ridiculous. We only cost, we normally retail them at £500. And anyway, he went back, got the order for 6 trailers. And on the back of that, we, amongst us all, and I think the 3 boys were involved as well, and definitely Chris, we built these 6 bell trailers, and on the profit of that, we went Formula 3 racing.
Now, there is a man in the room who was crucial to you in your Formula 3 career, and he's somewhere, and I promise not to sort of give him a boring interview, but can we get a light on...
Les Thacker.
Les Thacker is down there. Les Thacker of BP.
I mean, don't build him up too much. He only helped me in 77, 78, 79, 80, and then Formula 1, 81, 2 and 3. But other than that, I could have done it on my own.
Les was the competition boss at BP, and he decided that Derek Warwick really had what it took and helped him when you fought with Nelson Piquet through the 1978 season. And then, with Les's help, you were able to move into Formula 2. And Les and BP brought you into the Toleman Formula 2 team. And there it is, with BP emblazoned on the nose.
Without Les and BP, again, he's another one of those big, important people in your life that you wouldn't have made the next step without. And we were running this little private team, as I said, up until 78. At 79, I blanked out of my mind. I don't really talk about 79. But Les was still there, helping the Warwick family, if you like. And then it all went quiet at the end of 79, and I was summoned to BP House up in London. So I thought that was my P45. I wasn't really sure what it was all about. And I sat in reception, as nervous as hell. And all of a sudden I got brought up to the umpteenth floor, whatever it was. And I opened the door, and there was Les and his boss. There was Ted Toleman, Alex Hawkridge, Roger Silman, Chris
all
Whitty.
of them from the Toleman team.
Team. All from the Toleman team. And they put this team together where Rory Byrne was going to design the car with John Gentry and Pat Simmons. And we just destroyed them. But this also was a big step for me, because I've gone from me and my mates to a professional team. So, and then also to start with, it was Stephen South and myself, drivers. But Stephen did something silly and was kicked out of the team. And bugger me, they brought in Brian Henton. I mean, that was a steep learning curve. The guy, and I'll say this to Brian, and I still do, he taught me how to survive. He was a rough, tough racing driver, quick, super quick, but he knew all the angles. And if you watched him, there was a lot I took forward in my career that definitely helped me stay in Formula 1 for a long time. So although we clashed a little bit, he was a great instructor.
Well, you've been quite kind to Brian Henton just now, and in reading the book, I mean, he also taught you how teammates lie to each other. He wasn't a very honest teammate, was he? He really wanted to make sure that you didn't go too well.
I'll bring Dickie Bennett into this, because teammates don't lie, do they, Dickie? They always tell the truth. And, every now and again you find something. I don't think it's today, because today is just so technical that I don't think you can hide anything. But in them days, you could find 2 clicks of damper. You could find a different roll bar, a different millimetre of front ride height that would transform the car. Was I going to tell Brian Henton?
Yeah.
No.
Fair enough. Well, from Formula 2, the big step into Formula 1 wasn't just Derek Warwick making the big step, it was Toleman themselves moving into Formula 1. And here we have I hope, the Toleman Formula One car. There it is. Well, they used a turbocharger at a time when nobody else really did. And it was a very steep learning curve for the team itself, not just for you. I think in the first 2 seasons, it either didn't qualify or it broke, pretty much. So that must have been hugely character building. There you are in the great Formula One, in a car that's a disaster.
The first thing you did is you reached an ambition you thought you were never going to reach, Formula One. From Superstocks to Formula One, I mean. So that was a big move anyway, and that was unbelievable. But then Rory got it all wrong. He didn't want to use the engine as a stress member. Brian Hart produced miracles. What he produced, which is the engine, by the way. Sorry, Brian Hart was the Hart engine that we used. And for the first 2 years, it was just impossible. The turbo was fixed on the back of the gearbox, which is as far away from the inlet as you could get. So you could measure throttle lag by seconds almost. So it was a disaster. So we called one car the Belgrano. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that, but Belgrano, and the other one the Flying Pig, because they were also very ugly as well. But you were in Formula One, and I think that's where one of my strengths is, and obviously it's the title of the book, is never look back. Because there's many different times in my career where I didn't make the right move. You alluded to it earlier on. I didn't make the right move, the right car at the right time, etc., etc. But there was no point starting on that first race and going, I wish I drove that Williams in 85 instead of staying with Renault, or I wish I did this, or I wish I did that. And how many people in this room, you're all racing fans, if you like, I'd wished you were Ayrton Senna. Well, Ayrton's dead, so never look back, always look forward. Looking forward is what we've got in front of us. Looking back, you can't change. And I learned that from those early days with Toleman in 81 and 82. Don't look back. Don't wish you were driving the Ferrari or the Williams or the Benetton or whatever. And it was a big lesson. So the first 2 years were difficult. I qualified once in 81 in Vegas, and then a few more races in 82. But then this car came out. This is 83, this shows how clever Rory Byrne was with the twin rear wings and the front radiator. This car was good. This car was very good. This is the car that Ayrton Senna went on and did a good job in 84. But let me say, I set the car up.
But yeah, you actually...
It's my car. I mean, I set it up for him.
You finished, I think you were finished in the points 4 times in your last 4 races.
We did.
So by the end of that third year, things were really going. I know you didn't want to talk too much about accidents, but there were a lot of accidents in those days. And some of the accidents had a terrible outcome. Zolder 1982, which you won't want to be reminded of, you were seconds behind Gilles Villeneuve when he had his fatal accident. How did you cope with something like that?
Well, I come over the chicane, over the hill, down the other side, and I could see Gilles' car in the middle of the circuit, and obviously crashed. You could see the front end had taken an impact. So I stopped on the side of the circuit, ran back. Not only did it take an impact, there was nothing there. And Gilles had flown probably 100, 200 yards, and he was mixed up with all the catch fencing. His helmet was off. When I got to him, he was blue. I tried to pull him out the best I could without hurting him anymore, if you like, and just cradling him until the paramedics, or I don't think it was Prof. Watkins in them days, until somebody came to try and help him. In my gut, I thought he was dead, but apparently he didn't die during the night. Jumped in my car, went back to the pits, and just cried my eyes out. So I was able to control it in myself with what I used to call a little safe. I had this safe in the back of my head where I put tragedy. And I was able to put it in there, and sometimes I put it so deep that the tragedy, I couldn't even remember what happened. And that night, I went back to the hotel, and it was pretty somber, and it was announced that Gilles passed during the night. Next morning, got up, had a shower, got into my race stuff, and Rhonda, my wife at the time, said, "What are you doing?" I said, "It's race day. It's race day." And to this day, she could not understand, because I'm the sort of person I will swerve and write a car off rather than hit a rabbit or a bird. You know, I'm quite a soft, gentle guy. But something like that, I can put so deep in my subconscious that, and I passed that car, or that accident rather, 50 odd times in the race, and then thankfully the car broke. I never saw Gilles once. And then walking back, it all came flooding back. And on the way back to the garage, I started crying again. So it's something that you have or you don't have. It's destroyed a lot of drivers. I mean, I think something like 12 drivers were killed in the 12 years that I was in Formula One. So you had to have a pretty tough exterior in order to cope with situations like that.
Mm. Well. Having persisted with the Toleman, and finally it came right, finally the results started to come through, and a lot of people were talking about Derek Warwick. And I think 3 different teams came after you for the 1984 season, and you weighed it all up, and you decided to go to Renault, and there they are. And from the start, it was absolutely great. You led the Brazilian Grand Prix. I think you were 3rd and 2nd and 4th in the next 3 races. You were now running near the top of the World Championship table. But then it all went wrong.
Yeah. 84 was a great year because it was the first time I was earning money. I mean, with Toleman, I kid you not, I was on like £50,000, paying my own expenses, flights, etc., etc. So next to nothing. And then all of a sudden, these telephone numbers came along, and obviously, you know, A is a works team, and I decided that it was the right move, not staying with Toleman, but moving. And 84 was great. It was a great car, like you say. We led the first race, and we were competitive all the way through. And then something just happened in the team. It lost direction, and the engine was a massive problem. It kept blowing turbos, diffs, and gearboxes. And we retired more times than we finished. So we lost a lot of momentum. And then at the end of that year, this is actually 85, but at the end of 84, again, I was talking to Williams for the 85 season. But I remember I was under a lot of pressure from Larousse, who was the team boss of Renault at the time, to re-sign for 85 because I only had a 1-year contract. I thought it was the right thing to do. You know, they're a manufacturer, people that I relied on to help me through these situations said, right, no, Renault's the right way. And of course, Nigel Mansell signed for Williams for 85.
Nigel Mansell being Frank Williams' second choice after you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think, I could have signed the Williams deal for sure. It was less money. Whether the money drove me a little bit, I don't know. But I like to think that staying with Renault was right because Frank had the Honda engine. It was unreliable in 84, the same year that we were talking about with Keke Rosberg. And I decided to stay with Renault. Again, title of this book, Never Look Back.
Never Look Back.
Nigel went on and won a few Grand Prix that year, and I was in this shitbox that really wasn't the same. Unfortunately, we lost all our engineers at the end of 84. Michel Tetu, Peugeot, Larousse, they all went off and did their own thing. leaving us with basically people from the Renault factory, from the car division, who really had no idea. This thing flexed all over the place. I had an accident in the first corner, Saint-Devote at Monaco, and the car broke in half, and I stepped out the front of the car. That's how fragile it was. Yeah, I mean, it was still a good car at times, and I don't regret the move because it's what I thought was right at the time. And when I look back now, with all the facts that were in front of me, it was still the right move.
Sure. Well, then, for 86, you signed a contract to go to Lotus, actually as joint number 1 with Ayrton Senna, but you never got to Lotus. Why was that?
I mean, really, as much as I admire Ayrton, you have to say that when you drive with great drivers, or when you're in the company of great drivers, and I don't mean good drivers, I mean legends of our sport. Mario Andretti I've driven with, Ayrton obviously I knew, Mansell, Prost, Piquet, you name them, they're all legends of our sport. You realise how damn selfish they are. I'm selfish when I'm doing what I want to do. I do what I want to do. My sister will vote for this. Votes for this. I missed her wedding because I wanted to race in Spain in Formula 3, so I missed the weddings. And they're just things that, motor racing was the most important thing. Back to Ayrton. I'd signed my contract with Lotus. I was called to Lotus in December of 85. I thought to sign and get a nice little big fat check. And they just tore the contract up in front of me. I was stunned. What's going on? Ayrton doesn't want you as his teammate. Why? Ayrton wants to be number 1. He doesn't want to share the spare car. He wants first pick of mechanics. It's a British team. He knows they're all British mechanics, or most of them. And you realise just how selfish these people can be. Anyway, I was without a drive, and Ayrton decided that maybe I was too quick. Maybe he didn't want equal number 1. And I suppose if I look back now, was it a compliment? Of course it was. But it still wrecked my career because I lost a lot of momentum from that. I was without a drive. All the drives had gone. We were already in the 86 season, so I had to look elsewhere, and that's really what happened.
Well, we'll come to your sports car career in a minute, but you did get into Formula 1 in that year for a sad reason, because Elio De Angelis, who was driving for Bernie Ecclestone's Brabham team, he was killed in a test, I think. So I think you say in the book that as soon as Elio was killed, everybody who didn't have a Formula 1 drive was on the phone to Bernie Ecclestone saying, "Here I am, why don't you take me as his replacement?" Except for you. You were really the only guy around who didn't pester Bernie, and I think Bernie was impressed by that.
I think those that don't know, Bernie owned the team at that time, Brabham, and obviously losing Elio was a big thing for him. And I knew Elio well because, we had that driver strike in '82 in Kyalami. We shared a room with him. I almost shared a bed with him. We were all in the same room. And you get to respect somebody differently when you know them so well. And I was told within half an hour of Elio having his accident that he'd passed, and I should call Bernie. I couldn't find it in me. As much as I wanted Formula 1, I couldn't find it in me. So I didn't call. But mind you, I was thinking to call. Then after about 9-10 days, Bernie called me. And out of respect, he said, "Derek, I want you to drive for me. I want you to take Elio's place. You're the only person who didn't call me, so therefore I want you to drive." This is where it's all a bit strange, really, because he sent his plane over. I live in the Channel Islands in Jersey. He sent his plane over, picked me up, and took me back to the Brabham factory, where I met all my old friends, Charlie Whiting, Herbie Blash. All those guys were at Brabham at that time. And so I go into the office. By the time I got to his office, I was worth at least 100 million. I mean, I was worth 100 million. So I'm sat there, you know, really quite upright and thinking, okay, I've got this meeting all handled. No way. I mean, Bernie he saw it coming for sure. I said, look, Bernie, I said, as much as I'd like to drive for you, it's dead man's shoes. There's a lot to do here. We've got to pick the team up. The car's crap. We've got to do something with the car. Gordon Murray's lost direction, etc., etc. And I said, you know, before I go any further, beautiful car. Again, a shitbox, but it was a beautiful car.
It was a beautiful shitbox.
A beautiful shitbox, yes. And he said, no, Derek, he said, you don't understand. He said, it doesn't work like that here. He said, this is the contract. And to be fair to him, he had Elio's contract. He said, it's that less 7 races or whatever we were in the championship. I said, no, I said, I'm really not interested. I said, before I do that, I want to go and see Gordon Murray, who's the designer. I said, I want to go and see Herbie, I want to go and see Charlie, I want to see the car, I want to see what direction they're going, how they're going to make this car super. No. I mean, Bernie, no. No, you're not going through any of those doors until you sign the contract. I said, I'm not going to sign this bloody contract, Bernie, until I can go in and talk to Gordon. No. So I signed the contract. What can you do? You've got this gorgeous looking car.
Well, and I mean, that was, we saw that great piece of film if you were doing an early test, I think at Donington. But it wasn't really one of Gordon Murray's great moments, was it?
I think he was on the weed at the time. He just didn't have an answer for it. I think he made a super low car. The BMW engine was on 45 degrees to keep everything even lower, so you can see aerodynamically it was just beautiful. But the car just flexed. It just flexed all the time, and you could change roll bars, springs, ride heights, whatever. And it was still a shitbox, basically. And but in qualifying, especially at Monza, I remember this. Remember there are 1,500 engines. We had 1,350 horsepower. It was just the most magic thing you can ever imagine. You could not change gear quick enough. And I remember from FP3 to qualifying, we went up 2,000 revs on every gear. And as I got to the end of the pit exit at Monza, it was already on the limiter. It was just, and I smiled all the way around. And I got to Parabolica and boom, and it blew up. But yeah, it was
wonderful. Well, you actually had 5 more seasons in Formula One after Brabham, 4 with Jackie Oliver, the Arrows team, and its successor, Footwork. You did have 1 season with Lotus alongside Martin Donnelly. Martin Donnelly, of course, had a horrible accident in Spain, but he did survive. Then you had your great shunt, which the Monza shunt in the Lotus, which we've talked about, but I think
when the car broke.
Yeah, when the car broke. Yeah. There's one of the pictures of the accident, but there are others in the book. But while all this was going on, you were fitting in sports car racing as well. In Porsche's first, you won the Brands Hatch 1,000 kilometres with John Fitzpatrick, and by 1986, Tom Walkinshaw had hired you for the Silk Cut Jaguar team. And you soon proved you were a brilliant endurance racer. You actually missed being world sports car champion that year by 1 point. Tell us about the approach to driving big sports cars, long distance races, against driving in a Formula One car.
First of all, Tom Walkinshaw, an amazing person. He was just so driven to win, you know, and a difficult person, a really difficult person, but he was driven to win. I love sports cars. To be honest, it's difficult. It's easy for me to explain. When you're in the best cars, or one of the best cars, it's easy to win. Winning is easy in the best car. Running from 26 trying to get 1 point at 6th place is tough. It really is. So through my Formula One career, it was pretty difficult. But every time I got into a sports car, I was in one of the best. 86, Jaguar, 91 XJR 14, which was just the most amazing car in the world. And then, of course, when I won the World Championship in 92 with Peugeot. But I loved it. It's a different mentality because you're sharing. I'm not very good at sharing. So you had to share. So you had that 2 clicks of damper, that roll bar and the ride height. You had to give it to your teammate or your co-driver because it's important. And it's funny how I always considered myself quite strong mentally. And the one thing Brian Henson taught me was the first thing you need to do is shaft your teammate. So all the way through my Ask Eddie Cheever, all the way through my career, you shafted your teammate. But of course, all of a sudden now, you're in love with him. But it's funny how you see their weaknesses as well, because you were brought up to see their weaknesses, because that's where you want to try and have them over. So it was quite interesting driving these cars, because all of a sudden you were a bigger part of a bigger team. I have to say, driving at Le Mans with Jaguar, first time Jaguar came back, and we had the parade before the race on the Saturday morning. I mean, this is going to sound pretty stupid, but I cried. I mean, I cried again because there was 100,000 Brit fans there. They all had Jaguar T-shirts and banners and flags and everything. That experience I will take for the rest of my life, because driving for Jaguar and driving at Le Mans was, and also first time we ran at Silverstone, we won Silverstone too. Of course, so that was good too.
Well, since we're talking about sports cars and Jaguar, one of the great sports racing cars of that period, the XJR 14, designed by Ross Brawn, and I think that is one of your favourite cars of your career. It was just
amazing. It was a Formula One. I mean, when you drive a sports car, 86, 91, 92, not 91 this year, but the other cars, they're a little bit heavy. The gearbox is very laboured, and it's not like a Grand Prix car. You know, I've driven Indy cars, I've driven sports cars. Formula One is absolutely the pinnacle of motorsport. Everything is faster, everything is better, everything is quicker. This car was really a Formula One car with clothing. It really was. And I remember we drove on the South Circuit, which was a makeshift circuit at Silverstone. And I did the installation lap, come back in, all your engineers and Ross and everybody is glued to whatever you say. And I said, this is phenomenal. You've only done one lap. This car is phenomenal. Anyway, so so they checked all the installation. I went back out, and at that time you turn right to Abbey, and it was a fast right that went into a chicane where we had this makeshift pits, and all the guys were up against the Armco wanting the car to come round. I was flat. Lap one, I was flat through this corner, which was a pretty honky corner. I was flat, and all you could see is everybody ducking underneath the Armco because they thought the throttle had stuck open, you know.
Oh, right.
It was beautiful. The only trouble was to get in and out of that window, and being not the smallest guy in the world, it was pretty difficult. But
well, I was going to ask about that. I mean, it's a tiny cockpit.
Yeah.
And of course, you've got driver changes. How long were the stint? I mean, I know now that in Le Mans today, they have very short stints. Each stint is an hour or less. What length of stints did you do?
Well, we would, the stints are normally like 50, 55 minutes, but you do 3-4 hours. I think there's a maximum, I can't remember. But most Le Mans, I would have done 10.5 hours, something like that in the car. And driving these things at night, 250 mile an hour, along the Mulsanne, pouring with rain, 4 o'clock in the morning, is just magic. It's just magic. And then, if you're lucky enough to be in the 7 o'clock stint, you can start smelling the bacon and the sausages all day. And you think this stint needs to be over.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, you left Jaguar. You had a few problems with Tom Walkinshaw, didn't you? And there was one disqualification, which I think you blamed Tom for.
Well, again, I would have won the World Championship this year again, but we got disqualified from Silverstone. We won Silverstone, and I had a big fallout with Tom because I said I'm supposed to drive. He wanted me to wait and not start the race because he wanted me to win the championship. He put me in the car, whichever was the best car at the time. Martin Brundle, this is, his car had a throttle problem, so I jumped in with Theo Fabi, and we won the race. But because I hadn't driven the car, it was illegal, and I got disqualified. And I won't go into what I said with Tom, but it wasn't nice, I can assure you.
So you then moved on to Peugeot, and another beautiful car. If you want to know what late 1990s aerodynamics looked like, you look at the shape of that cockpit and how it goes over the engine behind Derek. Wonderful, wonderful car. And that was the one that won you.
Yeah, I had a phone call. I was talking to Jean. Jean Top was the team manager of Peugeot at the time. And I was talking to him through 91. He wanted me to go there. I put a few caveats in that, which we agreed on in the end. Again, the car was great, the engine was great, the gearbox very laboured. But I enjoyed it. And this is where you get into drivers. Yannick Delmas was my teammate there, and Mark Blundell. But Yannick was a very fragile guy. He did 50-odd Grand Prix. I have no idea how, but he did 50-odd Grand Prix. Super, super quick when I turned him on, but then I could turn him off. Honestly, it's like a switch. And when every now and again, I think, okay, now he's quick. Turn him down a bit. And then he was all right after that, it was fine. But some of the drivers are quite fragile. But I enjoyed driving sports cars. Jean was incredible to work for, really incredible. We had our first meeting. Dick, you will respond to this. Our first meeting had probably 40 people in there. We had tyre engineers, engine engineers, suspension, aerodynamics, any engineer you like, we're all in there, all trying to talk over each other. And of course, as a French team, everybody was French, but one of my caveats was everybody has to speak English, being the typical lazy Brit. So everybody had to speak English. And after about half an hour, I got up and walked out. I said, Jean, this is not going to work. And I walked out. About 2 hours later, he came, and I was eating some pasta or something, and he came and said, what's the problem, Derek? I said, if you want to win the World Championship in Le Mans, you need to change this. He said, what do you want me to change? I said, in the debrief room, that's come out a few times. I would like the engineers, the drivers, that's all, and yourself, Jean. I said, and then if we have a problem with the tyres, the engine, the suspension, we'll pull those guys in and we'll say to them, what's the issue here? From the very next debrief, that's exactly how it went.
So just with the engineers, the drivers and Jean Todt, how many people would that have been?
Because we were running two cars, there was still probably 11, 12 people in there, but it's better than 40, all trying to be the most important person in the world.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And they can't all be the most important person in the world because I am.
You mentioned Le Mans, that lovely line about smelling the breakfast as you're going round at 7 in the morning. You won Le Mans. All the other victories and all the other races you've had, where does actually winning the Le Mans 24 Hours stand? Is it as special a race as people say?
I've just done my 10 favourite races with Kevin Turner in Autosport. I spoke to a couple of you guys earlier on about this. Winning the World Championship in Superstocks F2 was such an ambition of mine that it's impossible to ignore. And I wanted to put it in my most favourite race. But Kevin being Kevin, you know, Formula One in sports cars has got to be in front of it. So my point being that, you know, Superstocks was very important to me.
And you were 19 years old and you were world champion.
Exactly, you know, and it's what we came for. But Le Mans was special because The year before this, obviously my little brother was killed. And
well, we're going to come to Paul in a minute.
And I wanted to win something special for him.
Yeah.
And at the end of this race, with half an hour to go, Yannick was in the car, so it was the ideal finish. French manufacturer, French driver, French race, Le Mans 24. Why would you change it? But Jean knew the work I put into this car. I put a lot of work into this car. He knew the Paul thing. And he dragged him out, Yannick out, and put me in to finish the race. And I think, wow, that's special. Yeah. Then you're going to take all the headlines out of the French press and put this POM in your car, you know.
Yeah. Derek, we talked about this before, and you said that you did want to talk about your brother Paul, because obviously it's an important episode. You cover it extremely well in the book. He was 14 years younger than you. He obviously idolised you, but I think you idolised him as well. He followed your path from stock cars to Formula Ford, FF2000, Formula 3, came into Formula 3000, which by then was just a very small rung under Formula 1. You were his mentor, you guided him, you gave him the benefit of your 20 years experience. He got into Formula 3000, and from the start he completely dominated it. I think in the first 5 rounds of that season he scored 5 wins. He was on pole position all 5 times. In that 5th round, a front wishbone broke, sort of failure that happened many times in your career. You always got away with it. But for Paul, it happened at the worst time. He went head-on into a barrier of wooden sleepers at Alton Park. That was 33 years ago. And I think it still is a tragedy that overshadows your life.
Yeah. Yeah, he was special, super quick. He didn't really look brilliant in Formula Ford and Formula 3. Quick, but not stunning. He was stunning in 3000. I mean, when we signed with Mansell Majwick, he was just brilliant. I mean, it was... And you're right, I mean, he followed everything of me. You know, he looked at everything I was doing, fitness. He came to St Moritz and we did cross-country skiing for like 2-3 weeks, and he was so bloody fit at the beginning of that 91 year. And he was ready for that year. But he was also super intelligent, too bloody good looking actually. He obviously took after Big Brother, modest. Yeah, he absorbed all the good things from me and from everybody. And he threw away all the bad things. And I have to say...
that was you winning Le Mans, and I'm going to jump on to there he is with you. Yeah.
I don't know. He was... he cheated me. He cheated me out of... He cheated me out of being world champion. He cheated me out of the rest of my life, really.
Yeah. But you did have to go on racing. I mean, that is the thing that, because I know how close a family you were, how close you were to Paul, that would have made a lot of people just say, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. But you managed to keep racing. I mean, how did you, was that this little safe in the back of your head that you locked him away in?
I had to make a bigger save for Paul.
Yeah.
For sure. Obviously, this was a '91 season, and I was driving for Tom Walkinshaw with Jaguar. And after Paul died, we had a big family meeting. My 3 sisters are here now. And I promised them that I wouldn't race no more. Then we went back and we had the same meeting again, and I said that I wanted to try. And there was a lot of crying. I think my brother-in-laws even were upset. And yeah, I think anyway, Tom created a secret test in what's now called the Red Bull ring, the A1 ring as I knew it. And I went there. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And it was one of those comical moments looking back that I got to the garages and everybody knew the tragedy that had gone on, obviously. And as I arrived in the garages, everybody had buried their head and doing makeshift nuts and bolts up just to avoid me. And but I hit it head on. You know, I went up to him and we hugged each other and I said, look, this can't happen. You know, anyway. The next day I drove. I was pretty quick, to be fair. But right at the end of the day, we put on some different rear dampers. And I can't remember whether one broke or seized or something, but something happened going into the Bosch curve. Remember, you're approaching this corner at like 220 mile an hour. And the thing is set in a spin, and I did like 3, 4, 5, 6 spins and put it into the catch fencing. Into the gravel. And I just got out of the car and cried. You know, as you can see now, I cry a lot. So I went back to the hotel, and I went back to the hotel, and 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm still awake, still crying, didn't know what to do. So I remember looking in the mirror, and I just said, look, you've got 2 options here: catch the next plane home, or be a racing driver. And this is where the safe come in again. And like I said, I imagine I made it a bigger safe. I used to put Paul so deep in the back of my head that there would be some races I would come away on a Sunday night. I couldn't remember him. I couldn't get him out, you know, because I put him so deep. And I went in, like I said, I decided I was going to do it, and we went and broke the lap record. I know it's simple to say, but we did. We went out and broke the lap record, and the rest is history. And the first race back was at Nürburgring, and with David Brabham. And he's not in the room today, unfortunately, but he was at the RAC Club.
Yes.
David was just amazing. He held me up all the way through the whole race, in terms of not in terms of driving, but in terms of the press, and he was phenomenal.
Yeah,
he really was. He really held the whole thing together for me.
Yeah. Well, there's so much more of your career we can talk about. You did GP Masters. You ran your own touring car team, which I know you don't terribly like to remember that, Alfa Romeo.
Did I drive that then? I sort of blanked that from my memory, along with 79.
Yeah. And of course, away from the track, you were working incredibly hard, working 24 hours a day, really, building up what is now a thriving Honda dealership. In the book, you describe how that went through a very difficult period before you dragged everybody up by the bootstraps. Also, and this is what I was saying earlier about how the fact that this is not just a racing driver's biography where he says the next Saturday we went to Monza and the gearbox broke, or we finished 6th or whatever. You had cancer, and you had 9 months fighting off a really virulent cancer. By now, you'd also become an important member of the motor racing establishment. There you are, working hard as an FIA steward. Tell us about this. You go to Grand Prix as an FIA steward. Now, what does that involve?
I've always wanted to give something back to the sport, and that's why I sat on the main board of the BIDC, the British Racing Drivers Club. I sat on the main board for 11, 12, 13 years, I think, and I was president of that club for 7 years. But at the same time, I was Jean had decided to change the whole way he went motor racing.
I should point out that's Jean Todt, who, having run Peugeot when Derek was there, then of course ran Ferrari's very successful Formula One effort, and then moved on to president of the FIA. Yeah.
So he brought me in. He said, "Look, we want to restructure the whole of the stewarding, because at that time everybody thought that Bernie was pulling all the strings, that Fred would get a penalty and get a drive-through because he was leading the championship." Absolute bull. I mean, that wasn't happening. But the quality of stewards in them days was pretty poor. They come from a rally, and they did not understand circuit racing at all. They didn't understand towing. They didn't understand overtaking. They didn't understand any of this. And some of them, honestly, was asleep halfway through the race. So, you know, it was a really strange time. Again, me and Jean got together, and we pulled some new stewards in, some younger stewards. And I have to say today, it's a really, really strong group of stewards. My job, really, I'm what they call the driver steward. So if there's an incident, I'm the one really that gives a 5-second penalty, a drive-through, or whatever. So that's really my job. And to be quite honest, although the other drivers don't particularly like me, it's something I really enjoy.
You have to decide whose fault it is.
Yeah. The trouble is, when the drivers come in, especially in the early days, they come in and they basically lie. They give them their interpretation of it, if you like. And I go, "Mate, I've done it. I've been there. I know this excuse. You know, it's volume 6, chapter 16 of my book of excuses, you know." So in the early days, it was a bit like that. But now they know how professional the stewards room is. We've got data. We know when they're on, off throttle. We know where they're turning. They know what ride height is. We know what speed they're doing. We know what tyre pressures they've got. We just know everything. So it's quite a different job today than what it was 15 years ago.
Well, in fact, you work incredibly hard behind the scenes, because as well as being an FIA steward, you're on the Safety Committee of Motorsport UK, which involves actually looking at the circuits, standing, looking at the Armco barrier, looking at the lines and deciding how safe they are. There's the Superstars team scheme for young drivers, which you judge. There's the Young Driver of the Year. It goes on, and of course, as you said, President of the British Racing Drivers Club, which is a very important post. And you even are sufficiently part of the establishment to be there. We can see you.
Undoubtedly the proudest day of my life. Meeting Her Majesty was just amazing. This woman, she got up to me. You can see we're talking to each other here. She said, "So you won Le Mans in '92? It just dumbfounded me. How would she? I mean, obviously she's been briefed, but how would she remember it?" And we had this little joke together, like, you know. No, I was. That was a very proud day.
There you are with 5-time Peter Reid of the RAC is on your left. That's of course Derek Bell, won Le Mans 5 times, and Lord March, now the Duke of Richmond, on your left. So you're part of the motor racing establishment.
Yeah, I mean, to go quickly back to Motorsport UK, it was Paul who really got me into circuit safety. After he died in '92, I walked every single circuit, which is 17 circuits, and I was dumbfounded by the standard. Armco's overlap the wrong way. Post.
And just to be clear, this is you walking alone round every corner of
Well, it wasn't like, actually, I saw John Symes here earlier on, but with John. We walked every single circuit. We were looking at the posts that were broken or bent, or we were looking at gravel traps that had mud in that was not a gravel trap, it was just an extension of the circuit. First of all, it was difficult for us to get into circuits, but gradually, with John Symes, I have to say, he was very instrumental into getting things changed, and that led on to other things, and like I say, I'm still on the committee now, so I enjoy doing that. That's good, and I love doing the FIA stuff, and being president of the British Racing Drivers Club. Unfortunately, Dad and Stan had passed by the time I was president. They would not believe it. They would not believe it. No.
Well, I'm just wondering what Uncle Stan would think of you shaking or not shaking her hand, but meeting Her Majesty the Queen.
Well, he'd probably be on the end here now. He'd probably sneaked his way in somehow.
Yes, he probably was. Bless him. We could talk, as I've said earlier, all night, but with the very knowledgeable Brooklands audience, we're going to get a microphone coming round so that you can ask Derek any questions you want to. But before we do that, there's one other man in the room that I would like to mention, because every great driver's autobiography has a writer standing behind, looking over the shoulder of the subject, and actually, I think Derek would say, doing an enormous amount of work. And one of the reasons why Derek's autobiography, reads so brilliantly is because his collaborator was David Tremaine, and he's sitting over there somewhere. If you could just get a microphone to David.
I'm sorry, I don't remember you doing much of the work, actually, Derek. But
well, I was going to ask you first. I mean, how long, how many hours, days, weeks did you talk to Derek to put this whole thing together?
I think that's the wrong question, with respect, Simon, because 2 years ago we sat in a restaurant in Hungary and reminded ourselves we started this project in 2017.
Wow.
And we decided it was somewhere quite similar until Derek said it was actually that table in the corner. The funniest thing is that two aging gentlemen discovered the virtues of Zoom during COVID. And honestly, I think if we hadn't found Zoom, we'd still be writing it. Don't you think, Derek?
Yeah, definitely.
But it was a brilliant way of, we'd do a couple of hours, wouldn't we? I'd say this is one of the books I'm proudest of, because it's a really honest driver's biography.
Yeah.
And not just an honest driver, but an honest biography. Because some of the ones you read in the 50s, 60s, were just crap. Some of them were just lies. Neubar's thing is full of mistakes and things that he's made up. All sorts of things like that. This is just so honest. This is the real guy. Wonderful. And it was an absolute pleasure working with Derek because of that. And because he's just, as you've all seen tonight, he's just a really good bloke. Yeah. And he's got a great story. And I love the fact that this is about two drivers who came from Hampshire.
Yeah.
Both of whom could have been champions.
Well, if you haven't already bought the book, that all the stuff that Derek's been telling us and what David has said as well, I hope will encourage you to do so. Now, we've got a microphone here. Harry has a microphone, and we got two microphones. Fine. All right. If you've got a question for Derek, could you wave a big arm?
I've got a question here, Simon.
We'll get a microphone to you.
I think you've beaten me.
So, talk. When you were a kid, who was your hero in motorsport? Your hero in motorsport?
I admired Ayrton Senna because he stuck by his values. He obviously, since then, has become an absolute legend of our sport, and I use that for very few racing drivers. But he was a legend of our sport. Dickie will say, because he obviously drove for Dickie in F3. He is a legend. Yeah, I have to say Ayrton. I mean, before that, Fangio, Jim Clark, Jochen Rindt, Jackie Stewart. I mean, there's a fag paper between all of them. You know, Mario Andretti. They're just absolute legends of our sport. But yeah, Ayrton had this. You would have a debrief room, and because he was racing when I was racing, and a driver would come late. It might be Alain Prost, Piquet, always taking the mickey out of something. Nelson did, but nobody took any notice of him coming in late. The door would open, and I swear to you, Ayrton would walk into the room, and the whole place would go quiet. Now, that's with all his fellow racing drivers. So he had something. I really don't like saying it sometimes, because he did fuck my career up. But anyway, yeah, probably Ayrton.
Okay, good answer.
Another question here.
There's a question over there, I think.
Derek, I know the passion, time, effort you've put into safety matters in motor racing. What's the single most prominent factor that means that motor racing is no longer the risk that it once was?
Safety. I mean, these cars are safe. You know, they're almost too safe. They're too strong. It's now the drivers now that are the most vulnerable part of an accident, because nothing else moves. Everything's solid. So the initiative from the FIA, and excuse me, I forget, who was before Jean Todt, the president? Sorry? Who? Max Mosley, sorry. It missed me there. Max was massive. You know, he did so much for motor racing in general, but also for Formula One. What he did for safety, followed on by Jean, was tremendous. And that changed the whole face of motor racing. I think in my day, there was a certain amount of respect that you had for each other, because you come through a tough era where a lot of drivers were either maimed or killed. Now all of a sudden these drivers, they bounce off each other, they hit a barrier and nothing happens, wheels come off, whatever. So I think they've just lost that bit of respect between drivers, whereas back in my day there certainly was more respect.
Mm. Right, who else have we got?
Derek, thank you very much for a fantastically entertaining evening and a great entertainment from a career perspective. You said you had a contract with Lotus, you got close to a deal with Frank. Did you ever get close to a deal with Enzo or with Ron?
I did meet Enzo, actually, but it was not serious. I'd like to think it was, and often I've told people it was, but it really wasn't serious. With Ron, no. I remember in '78 when I punted Chico Sierra into the barrier on the last lap at Brands, costing Ron, I think he said $3,500 or something. And I was just about to get into a celebrity car. It was when the Indy cars were at Brands Hatch. And my father and Uncle Stan pulling him by the scruff of the neck and throwing him over the barrier. As he left the barrier, he said, "You will never drive for me." And he was right, I didn't.
Okay, Dick.
Derek, being involved with Motorsport UK, from your days of your racing F1 sports cars, I'm intrigued these days, track limits.
Really?
How do you
Dick, of all the things you could ask me, track limits.
Well, you've driven F1, you've driven sports cars in your era, fantastic racing. Safety, I agree these days, but the track limits now are just, I can't get my head around it.
It's a good subject, Dickie, really, because we're being driven more and more into track limits. So we're driving more and more into natural restraints like grass, gravel, like we saw in Austria this year. You know, last year there was 100 track limits or something. This year there was 14 or whatever. So putting natural deterrence on the edge of the circuit is 100% the way to go. We've all got too invested in it. You know, I'm a steward, so I have to judge track limits. But I hate it. I really do. I think a car dropping off the edge of the circuit and dust throwing up and the car sparking as it hits the rumble strip. Is that not exciting? Is that not good television? So I think it's a subject that we've all got carried away with, and I think the only way to sort it is to put natural restraints on the edge of the circuit. Then we don't need special little gizmos in order to say that you were 1 millimetre over, because I have drivers come up to me in tears because they've lost pole position or whatever because the rear tyre was this much over the white line. So yeah, it's not my favourite subject.
Okay. Yeah, we've got one right in the middle of about row 4.
Okay. Hello, Derek. Thanks for an informative talk tonight. Thank you. My question is about Lewis. How do you think he'll fare at Ferrari? And do you think he can win an 8th World Championship there?
I am the biggest Lewis Hamilton fan in the world. 104, 5, I don't know, I've even lost count now. Grand Prix wins, 100 pole positions, 7 World Championships. A lot of people give him a lot of bad press. Social media is horrific for him because he's different. But what Lewis has done is he's brought motor racing to the front page, the back page, the middle page, every page, because he is different. Nobody's giving him the respect he deserves. He really is a legend of our sport. You know, when somebody asked me a question about who is the greatest, and I said Ayrton, I have to put Lewis there with it. He's been brilliant for Formula One. He's disliked because he wears earrings and nose studs and things that us tough guys don't agree with. But he is what he is, and I think this is the right time for him to go to Ferrari. I think he might regret it because, from what I understand, the wind tunnel has changed at Mercedes. That's why we're seeing these big changes. They've gone from a rough belt to a soft belt. Sorry, a little bit technical. Dickie would know. And they're now getting the car going well. So will he regret this move? Maybe. Does every Formula One racing driver want to drive for Ferrari? Yes. I don't care who they are. They all want to drive Ferrari. I know I would have done anything to drive for Ferrari. I think it's a great move for him, and I think it's a great end to his career, both financially and also, from what I understand, their 26 package, engine package in particular, is spectacular. So, the one thing you realise in your career is the great drivers have a habit of making the right moves, unlike me.
Just to put in a little supplementary, and then we've got a couple of more questions. I wanted to ask you about the politics of different teams, because thinking of it today, what goes on in Ferrari and the atmosphere in Ferrari is so different from the atmosphere in Mercedes, for example. It's almost like the difference between the Italian temperament and the German temperament. Ferrari have lost a lot of races, apparently because of bad organisation, bad calls, bad strategies.
What nationality are they?
Well, of course.
Italian.
Yeah.
They'd lost it before Ross, Jean and Michael went to the team. When they went to the team, they brought a bit of strategy, a bit of British thinking, and understanding doing one thing at a time rather than, oh, we're slow, so let's throw these 10 things at it. You know, one time, one thing. And maybe that will happen with Lewis going there. Yeah. I was really hoping that Adrian was going there, but it looks like he's going to.
It would have been amazing.
I think that would have been great. But yeah, they are typically Italian. You know, they get a lot of pressure from the Italian press, and you know they want to fix things instantly rather than have a long-term plan that we're going to do this, and this in 5 races' time. Yeah. But that's the difference, and that's the difference in the way that the British teams go about their motor racing. It's a bit like I said with Jean when I first went to that very first meeting and to the second meeting. You know, I tried to bring a bit of British thinking behind the team.
Right. A question right over there, I think.
Yeah. We were at Knock Hill last weekend. Fabulous event. Thank you very much, Alan. But again, track limits. It's just totally mental at the put on, I think it's after Scotsman's Corner, through the chicane. They've got this huge, it's not even tyres anymore, it's cardboard or polystyrene. So they will cut, they will do it, because drivers are drivers. But then this devastation, they completely move it. Cook went off and took the whole barrier out with them. What is the point of these barriers? They're going to take the most natural line and they will shift. They will shift it if they have to. So I know Formula One's different, it's really tight, but with touring cars, it's great spectacle, and you've got the really high cambered entrances and outs, and it's great fun. But when you see these tyre things, well, they're not tyres anymore, they're just completely destroyed, and you think, what is the point of it? And I can get Alan's point, it's just ridiculous. I mean, absolutely ridiculous.
To be fair to Motorsport UK, they're trying to control British touring cars the best they can, as does Alan Gow, as does everybody else. Great racing, great teams, but because of the way the cars are built, they can take liberties on the track limits, and unless you stop them or allow it, and that's what's happened. You know, Jonathan Palmer, a great friend of mine, a super intelligent guy, owns 5-6 tracks in the UK. He is so anti-track limits. And so everybody's firing about this track limit thing, and I haven't got an answer. All I can say is, in Formula One, we are gradually getting there. What you do with British touring cars, I have no idea. Dickie, do you want to answer that question?
What are your thoughts, Dickie?
It's a very interesting question from over there, because obviously we were at Knock Hill, and it was one of the reasons I brought up with Derek track limits. And I had a meeting with Alan Gower Sunday morning, and you know, Alan openly admits he hates it as well, as Derek said. It is so hard to police, and as Derek said earlier, one car might move out the way to avoid having a clash with the car alongside him, but he gets done for track limits. Yet
which is wrong.
It's hurting pure racing, and it's the question that Alan Gower puts it back to Motorsport UK. We have to be seen to be setting an example for the junior categories. Otherwise, every category that supports motorsport in UK would be abusing track limits. But it's the policing of it, and in some ways we have a judge of fact, and we got penalised at Croft through one of our number one drivers, Jake Hill, in qualifying, got put out because of, but no one could show us a camera or anyone. They had to rely on this one person who reports back to the clerk of the course that it was track limits. No one could show us any evidence that there was a problem, but that guy's missed out on qualifying.
You see, this is what I don't understand. In Formula One, it's much easier because the corners that we have problems with the track limits, we've got cameras. So we have cameras at the front, cameras at the rear, and we can decide 100%, 99.9% whether that car has gone off or hasn't gone off. But, you know, not all tracks can have the same facilities, cameras, as Formula One. So it's a lot easier in Formula One than what it is in touring cars.
Okay, another question? There was one down there, I think. Yep.
Yeah, hi Derek. One question which really goes back to the very first slide. Being a local to Alresford, are you still connected with Warwick Trailers and the business that your father and Stan built?
Yes and no. Obviously, Dad and Stan built up a great business with Warwick Trailers. And then there was a time when they sort of had enough. And we were very fortunate that Chris Jones, my brother-in-law, came along and bought it from Dad. And he ran it very successfully for, correct me, Chris, but probably another 10 years or something. And then he sold it to a third party, K2 or something, I can't remember, about 5-6 years ago. So it was still Blue and it's still Warwick Trailers. But in the last 6 months, they've unfortunately just gone into liquidation. So maybe it'll come back into the Warwick family in one way or another. So, so it's got quite a good story. But Warwick Trailers was just amazing for me, as you can imagine. You know, right from that first slide, without Dad and Stan and Warwick Trailers, and that's what really put me on that first step of Formula One. And to reach that step from, and I said earlier on, from super stocks, even stock cars back in the very first year, to Formula One is a big jump. I'm very proud of that jump. I'm very proud of what we've done in our career, and I'm very proud that you guys have turned up to listen to this guy from Hampshire that just was very lucky in his life, and I do consider myself very, very lucky. You know, I've got a fantastic partner with Margaret. I've got amazing sisters with Julie, Dealey and Linda. And I just think everything in my life is just brilliant. It's just lovely. And I have to say, I don't know whether we're finishing now, but I have to say I've enjoyed tonight immensely. These nights for me are easy because we're talking about a career that's not your everyday career, where a lot of these drivers now, and I'm very involved with young drivers, with BRDC Superstars and Young Driver of the Year, which Lando won, George Russell won, Albon was a part of, so was Oliver Bierman, who we will see with the Haas next year. So I'm very involved with all that. I have to say that, and that's through a lot of hard work, but also being lucky. So I don't know whether it's the right time to wrap this up.
That's an excellent way to wrap up.
I'd just like to say thank you, guys. I've really enjoyed it. Sorry for the emotion, but you can see that I am an emotional sort of guy. I absolutely loved tonight. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for turning out. Thank you for asking the questions, other than Dickie's question about track limits. But we'll have words later on when we go and have a beer. So thank you very much indeed.
It's a wonderful way to finish. Derek Warwick, ladies and gentlemen. There are still a few books left at the back if you feel, after having heard all you've heard tonight, you'd like to hear or read the rest of the story.
Yeah, the book is fantastic. The publisher did kindly, thank you, Eric, send me an advance copy, and I read it in about 3 days. It is absolutely brilliant, so you don't need me to persuade you how good it is. It's excellent. So, Derek, we have a little present for you. Don't get too excited because it's a piece of concrete. But it's a very, very special piece of concrete because it is an original part of the world's first purpose-built racetrack Brooklands.
Oh, wow.
The concrete that was laid in 1907. So I hope it fits into your hand baggage on your trip back to...
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Simon. Simon? Simon. Thank you.
Well done again.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Good, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, Simon. Excellent as always.